September 1928, New York City. Inside a quiet suite on the Upper West Side, the most dangerous gamblers in America are sitting around a poker table. Cigarette smoke fills the room. Cash is stacked in piles. Tens of thousands of dollars change hands every few minutes. And sitting among them is the most powerful crime boss in the country. His name is Arnold Rothstein, the man who fixed the 1919 World Series, the man who bankrolls Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, and Bugsy Siegel, the man who controls gambling in New York. Nobody cheats Arnold Rothstein, because people who cheat Arnold Rothstein usually disappear. But tonight, someone is trying. Across the table sits a quiet man from Missouri, calm, relaxed, barely talking, just watching the cards. His name is Alvin Clarence Thomas, but almost nobody calls him that. They call him Titanic Thompson. And tonight, Titanic Thompson is about to pull off one of the most audacious hustles in gambling history. The game runs all night. Hands keep coming. The bets get bigger. The stacks of cash get higher. Then, something impossible happens. Arnold Rothstein, the smartest gambler in America, starts losing. Not a little. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. By morning, Rothstein owes nearly $500,000. In 1928, that's the equivalent of millions today. And Rothstein knows something is wrong. He studies the players, studies the cards. Somewhere in this room, someone has just robbed him, but he can't prove how, so he refuses to pay. 2 months later, Arnold Rothstein is standing in the hallway of the Park Central Hotel. A gunshot echoes through the corridor. Rothstein collapses to the floor. And as the most powerful gangster in America bleeds out in a hotel hallway, the trail leads back to a single poker game. A poker game run by a man who had spent his entire life perfecting one skill: tricking people into betting on things they didn't understand. A man who could hustle pool players, outshoot professional marksmen, beat golf champions, and even fool Al Capone himself. A man who made millions of dollars betting on the impossible. This is the story of Titanic Thompson, the greatest gambler who ever lived. Alvin Clarence Thomas, born November 30th, 1893, Monette, Missouri, a small town in the Ozarks, 30 miles from the Arkansas border. His father Lee was a gambler, playing cards the night Alvin was born. Didn't see his son until the next morning. A few months later, Lee took whatever cash he could find in the house and disappeared. Alvin never saw him again. His mother Sarah remarried a hog farmer named Willie Hendricks. 7 people in a 3-bedroom cabin outside Rogers, Arkansas. Alvin hated the farm, hated school, couldn't read, but numbers made sense to him. Odds, probability, the mathematics of chance. He had extraordinary hand-eye coordination, could shoot birds between the eyes from 50 yards. His uncles noticed it first, put a rifle in his hands when he was 8. By 12, he was the best shot in 3 counties. At 14, he devised his first hustle. There was a fishing hole near the farm. City men came with expensive gear. Alvin wanted that gear. He trained his water spaniel to dive to the bottom of the pond and retrieve rocks. Then, spent an entire day throwing hundreds of rocks into the water, each one marked with an X. The next week, he approached a fisherman, bet his dog against the man's casting outfit that his spaniel could retrieve any rock thrown into the pond. The fisherman insisted on marking it himself, scratched an X, threw it in. The dog dove, came up with a rock, marked with an X. The fisherman never figured it out. How could he? The pond was full of X-marked rocks. Anyone the dog grabbed would win the bet. At 16, Alvin left home. His mother made him promise not to drink or smoke. He kept those promises his entire life. Clear head, sharp eyes, never dulled by alcohol while his opponents were. He had 50 cents in his pocket. He would never be broke for more than 6 hours at a time. For 50 years, Titanic Thompson traveled America looking for action. He started as a door-to-door salesman, then joined a traveling medicine show run by a sharpshooter named Captain Adam Bogardus. Learned to shoot silver dollars out of the air, or appear to. The real trick was palming a pre-punctured coin and tossing it instead. He practiced card manipulation for hours each day, dealing from the bottom, marking cards with his thumbnail, tiny creases invisible to anyone but him. He could mark an entire deck within minutes of sitting down. He practiced throwing rocks, coins, playing cards. He could flip a card through the air and cut a flower off its stem. Later in life, he would throw 52 cards into a hat from across the room. Hit all 52. He practiced dice control for months, learned to throw specific numbers on command. Not always, but often enough to shift the odds. His car trunk was his office. Golf clubs, left-handed and right. A bowling ball, a rifle, a pool cue, a .45 pistol, a flat-sided throwing rock with edges beveled to fit his fingers, a suitcase full of cash. He drove from town to town looking for action, could read a room in 30 seconds, knew who had money, who would bet, who was dangerous. He was ready for any proposition. In 1910, he killed his first man. He had won a riverboat called the Rambler in a dice game. The previous owner stayed on as crew. On the first trip, a man named Jim Johnson accused Thompson of cheating, threw him overboard into the dark river. Thompson climbed back on deck, found Johnson threatening his girlfriend with a knife, her clothes torn. Thompson grabbed a hammer, beat Johnson across the skull, threw him overboard. Johnson drowned. The local sheriff gave Thompson a choice: stand trial or hand over the riverboat. Thompson gave up the boat, walked away free. 4 more men would die at Thompson's hands over the next 2 decades. 2 bank robbers in St. Louis, 1919. The police chief thanked him personally. 2 poker game holdup men in Missouri. Thompson and his bodyguard shot them both. Known criminals, no charges. The last was in Texas, 1932. A masked man held Thompson at gunpoint near a country club. Thompson shot him dead. The dying man turned out to be Jimmy Frederick, 16 years old. He had caddied for Thompson earlier that day, seen the size of the stakes, watched Thompson count out $40,000 in cash, come back that night for the money. With his dying breath, Frederick confirmed he'd been robbing Thompson. 5 killings, 0 charges. A proposition bet is a wager on something impossible. The secret? It's not impossible. Not if you know something the other person doesn't. Thompson invented propositions the way Edison invented light bulbs. He had dozens of them, each one perfected through years of practice. The walnut throw. Bet he could throw a walnut over a 5-story building. Hours earlier, he'd visit the fruit stand, hollow out a walnut, and fill it with lead shot. Hide it among the others. When he made the bet, he knew exactly which walnut to grab. The weighted shell flew like a baseball. The road sign. Arriving in a new town, Thompson would drive out at night and physically move the distance marker 5 miles closer. Dig up the post, replant it. The next day, riding with locals, he'd bet the sign was wrong. They'd measure with an odometer. Thompson would collect. He'd be gone before anyone thought to check if the sign had moved. The watermelon count. Sitting on hotel steps, Thompson would bet he could guess the exact number of melons on a passing truck within 5. He'd paid the driver the day before to count every melon and pass that hotel at exactly 4 p.m. He'd win almost $1,000 on a single truck. The hotel key. Thompson would bet front desk clerks he could throw his room key across the lobby and into the keyhole, 30 feet away. If successful, he stayed free. If not, he paid double. The clerks always took the bet. Nobody could do that. But Thompson had spent years practicing. With the large skeleton keys of that era, he almost never missed. The 500-yard drive. Thompson bet Chicago golfers he could drive a ball 500 yards. At the time, 200 yards was expert. He let the bets build for months. Finally, they forced his hand. He got to choose the course. He waited until January, drove the ball onto a frozen lake. It bounced and rolled for a quarter mile. No rules had been broken. The Horseshoe Stakes challenged a professional pitcher named Frank Jackson, $10,000. What Jackson didn't notice, Thompson had set the stakes at 41 feet instead of the regulation 40, 1 extra foot. Every throw came up short. Jackson lost everything. Never figured out why. The Birthday Paradox. Thompson would bet that if they stopped 30 strangers on the street, 2 would share a birthday. Sounds impossible. 365 days in a year, but at 30 people, the odds are nearly 70% in his favor. He won this bet against Arnold Rothstein himself. The License Plate Con. Walking down Broadway with a mark, Thompson would bet that the first New Jersey plate to appear would make a better poker hand than the first New York plate. 30 seconds later, a New Jersey car would round the corner. 3 threes. The mark never knew Thompson's partner had been parked there all morning. If a thing's hard to do, most folks are too lazy to do it. That puts you one up on them. Thompson didn't pick up a golf club until his 30s. His first swing went 300 yards. Beginner's luck. But the ball didn't roll on wet grass. He lost the bet. He played without complaint. He'd gotten something better, the golfing bug. He took lessons in San Francisco, practiced obsessively. Within a few years, he was beating professionals. Ben Hogan, one of the 5 greatest golfers in history, traveled with Thompson in the early 1930s. They played money games across Texas and the Deep South. Hogan called him the best shot maker he ever saw, said only a fool would play him in a game he suggested. Thompson was naturally left-handed, trained himself to play right-handed just as well. He'd beat a wealthy country club player right-handed, barely, just enough to make the mark think he had a chance. Then, he'd offer double or nothing left-handed. They always took the bet. He always won. He'd show up with fake casts on his arms, bandages over his eyes, taught himself to play from a wheelchair, would bet professionals he could beat them sitting down. He usually did. He hired unknown professionals to pose as his caddies. After beating his mark, he'd bet his caddy could beat them too. The insulted mark would double down. The caddy would destroy him. Some of those caddies became Hall of Famers: Byron Nelson, Sam Snead, Harvey Penick. In the 1930s, top professionals earned $30,000 a year. Thompson made that in a week. When asked why he never turned pro, he said he couldn't afford the pay cut. Chicago, late 1920s. Thompson is leaving a card game with Al Capone. They pass a fruit vendor on the street. Thompson stops, points at a 5-story building across the street. He bets $500 he can throw a lemon over it. Capone had heard of Thompson's tricks. He wasn't going to be fooled, not this time. He picked the lemon himself, squeezed it until juice ran down his fingers, crushed the pulp, handed the weightless shell to Thompson. Throw that. Thompson took the crushed lemon, wound up, threw. The lemon sailed over the building and out of sight. Capone stared, paid the $500. What Capone didn't know, Thompson had an accomplice standing beside him. The moment Capone handed over the crushed lemon, the accomplice swapped it for one Thompson had prepared earlier, hollowed out, filled with buckshot, heavy enough to throw over any building in Chicago. Capone was impressed, not angry. He respected the craft, took Thompson under his wing, gave him errands to run, introduced him to the right people. Thompson had conned the most dangerous man in America and walked away $500 richer. September 1928, New York City. High-stakes poker on the Upper West Side, organized by George McManus, a well-connected gambler. The players included bookmakers, mobsters, and professional gamblers. One of them was Arnold Rothstein. Rothstein was known as the Brain. He had fixed the 1919 World Series, the Black Sox scandal, the most powerful crime boss in New York, connected to Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel. Every major criminal enterprise in the city ran through Rothstein. Thompson had cultivated Rothstein for years. Small bets, won some, lost some, built trust. But Thompson didn't like Rothstein, thought he was smug. The September poker game was his trap. Working with an associate named Nate Raymond, Thompson fixed the game, recruited other players into the scheme. By morning, Rothstein owed $500,000. Raymond was owed $319,000 of it, most of which, by secret agreement, would go to Thompson. Rothstein suspected he had been cheated, refused to pay, said he'd settle up after the November elections. He had heavy bets on Herbert Hoover and expected to win $550,000. He never made it to November. September 4th, 1928, room 349 of the Park Central Hotel. Someone put a bullet in Arnold Rothstein's stomach. He staggered into the hallway, collapsed, died 2 days later without naming his killer. The newspapers called it the crime of the century. 1929, the McManus trial was a media sensation. George McManus was charged with murder. Thompson was called as a witness. Asked what he did for a living, Thompson said he played a little golf for money. Asked about high-stakes poker games, his memory failed. Asked about McManus, his memory improved. McManus was a swell loser, a man who would never kill over a debt. Thompson never revealed his role in fixing the poker game. McManus was acquitted. No one else was ever charged. Years later, Thompson told his fifth wife who actually killed Rothstein. It wasn't McManus. It was Hyman Biller, Rothstein's bagman, the enforcer who collected debts. Biller fled to Cuba after the shooting and never returned. The trial made Thompson famous. Newspapers printed his picture. Everyone knew his face now. Fame was bad for a hustler. Titanic Thompson married 5 times. Every bride was a teenager. The first was 17, divorced after 1 year. The second was 17. Met her when she tried to pick his pocket in Pittsburgh. She stayed 12 years, died when a car struck her while Thompson was on the road. The third was 15. He married her to avoid statutory charges. She gave him a son. They divorced. The fourth was 16, pregnant, divorced after 5 years. The fifth was 18. Thompson was 62. In his late 50s, he'd been caught with minors in Arizona, served 8 months for contributing to the delinquency of minors. 5 wives, 5 killings. The symmetry wasn't accidental. A man who took what he wanted and never paid the price. Until he did. Thompson had one weakness: horse racing. Unlike cards or golf or propositions, he had no edge at the track, no way to fix the outcome, no way to control the variables. The horse didn't know it was supposed to win. The jockey couldn't be bribed. The track couldn't be rigged. He bet anyway, lost millions. What he won at golf, he lost at the track. What he won at poker, he lost at the track. The pattern never changed. He knew the math was against him. Bet anyway. Minnesota Fats, the legendary pool hustler, called Thompson the greatest action man of all time. But even Fats took $1 million off Thompson over the years. Thompson eventually won most of it back, but the cycle continued. What he made, he lost. What he won, he gambled away. In his 50s, Thompson won the Arizona State Trap Shooting Championship 4 years in a row, 1951 to 1954. Still the sharpest eyes in any room. Still the steadiest hands. In 1970, Thompson was honored at the first World Series of Poker in Las Vegas, 77 years old. Benny Binion invited him as a guest of honor. They gave him a trophy inscribed Living Legend. By then, the world had changed. Vegas had plastic-coated cards and video cameras. You couldn't crimp corners anymore. The proposition bets that made Thompson famous required anonymity. He had none left. Everyone knew his face. Everyone knew his tricks. He spent his final years in a nursing home near Dallas, living on Social Security. He had won fortunes from Capone, Rothstein, and hundreds of country club millionaires. He died May 19, 1974, 80 years old, penniless. Crime writer Damon Runyon followed Thompson for years. sat with him at the Rothstein trial, watched him work propositions on Broadway. When Runyon wrote The Idol of Miss Sarah Brown, he based the hero on Thompson, a gambler named Sky Masterson. The story became Guys and Dolls. Marlon Brando played the lead. Thompson's eldest son Tommy learned the trade, became a card mechanic himself. After Thompson died, Tommy became a preacher, spent his life warning people about gambling. 5 wives, 5 murders, millions won, millions lost. Always moving, always looking for the next mark. In the end, the only thing that couldn't be hustled was time.